Time has expired. I now recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Good, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. Mr. Secretary, your former boss, Defense Secretary Robert Gates, said a few years ago that President Biden, quote, has been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades, end quote. Even former President Obama tried to warn people during the 2020 campaign, and he said, don't underestimate Joe's ability to screw things up. Americans seem to agree, as a Gallup poll in February showed, that only 40% of Americans approve of the way President Biden is handling foreign policy affairs, and only 36% approve of the way he's handling specifically the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I think this budget is further proof of this administration's misguided priorities. Would you say that Americans are safer today than they were in January of 2021?
I would.
On what basis?
I think we have strengthened our alliances, and I think the unified response that we've seen in Europe to Russian aggression has shown kind of a revitalized Western response of democracies.
If I may,
you wouldn't have seen the Germans.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you. Thank you for claiming my time. Can you explain why the Department of Defense wants to spend $3.1 billion on climate programs, or 4 times what the $682 million allocated for Ukraine? So $3.1 billion on climate programs in this budget, which is more than 4 times the $682 million allocated for Ukraine.
First, I would say that we are in this fiscal year spending more than that on Ukraine, and we are about to ask for another supplemental to increase to make sure that the Ukrainians have what they need to continue the fight.
From a military standpoint, what's the $3.1 billion for on climate programs?
That is both on that has 2 basic parts. It's the installation side, our facilities, our buildings, our bases, and then
how does investing in climate programs help military preparedness, military readiness, military effectiveness?
Well, on the facility side and the resilience, it's to be better prepared for extreme weather events, which are increasing in frequency. On the vehicle side, the idea is to reduce our logistics footprints to have more capability to be not tethered to a logistic train of fuel in all cases.
This president,
and to move where the market is going.
Thank you. This president told our troops, of all people, our troops back in June, that the greatest threat to America is climate change. He even added his typical, this is not a joke. I guess he needed to add the, hey, this is not a joke, because the soldiers were probably, I have to presume, surprised to hear from the commander-in-chief that the greatest threat to the country, and telling them as military personnel that the greatest threat is climate change. And then just last week, and you've kind of alluded to it already, the president stated that we're going to spend billions making every military vehicle climate friendly. I think that makes us the amusement of our adversaries around the world, that's what we're focused on. It's as embarrassing as it was to send John Kerry to essentially beg the Russians to consider the climate impact of the invasion, if they were going to do that just before the invasion took place, even days before. But the president said, quote, every vehicle is going to be climate friendly. Every vehicle, I mean it. We're spending billions of dollars to do it. Do you think that climate concern should be the main priority for our military vehicles?
It is not the primary concern. Their effectiveness is. But
well, the president said that we're going to spend billions to do that. This budget, switching gears to another topic, contains $34 million to address, quote, concerning behaviors and extremism. What does this mean? What's the purpose of that funding?
As Secretary Austin has stated, the incidence of extremism in the military is low, but any amount is not acceptable, and so these efforts.
Well, I want to interject there on Secretary Austin. I'm glad you brought him up, because he said when we were asked to give an exception to approve him in the House because he didn't meet the 7 years of required retirement between military and civilian service, he said that his self-proclaimed mission essentially was to root out racism in the military. Is that truly a significant problem? I mean, for him to say that's one of the reasons why he was there, to root out racism in the military, it seems to me the military has been an example of integration of merit-based performance and advancement, as evidenced by Secretary Austin and Secretary Powell before him on the Secretary of State side. Is this truly a significant problem for our heroes in the military?
Well, I would say, first of all, racism exists in society. It exists in every institution.
They were to spend $34 million to address it in the military.
but racism and extremism are two different topics, and you were I think you were citing a figure about addressing extremism. Racism is a different issue, and I would certainly say Secretary Austin probably has more experience with this issue than I do, and so I certainly would not question his.
All right, well, my time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Gentleman's time has expired, and now recognize